On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, we continue talking through the Deuce McBride, Josh Hart starting debate of the century, Karl-Anthony Towns preseason defense, the power of OG Anunoby, and a rookie watch. All that next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast here with you at least 5 days a week. This week, we're going to end up with 6 or 7 episodes, but that's not your concern. Unless you want to become an everydayer, then be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell on YouTube to ensure you never miss an episode. And be sure to do the same on your favorite podcast platform of choice so you always have us with you on the go. But who's shilling for subs? I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And I'm once again joined by Geoff Rasmussen, the co-host of the Hot Hand Theory, to continue our conversation from earlier today. If you missed it, make sure you make that your first listen of the day, and then circle back here for part 2, where we continue talking through the merits of starting Josh Hart versus Deuce McBride, how the Landry Shamet injury changes the equation, and we get into a whole bunch more in just a sec here on Locked On.
Yeah, and I think it's a shame because I think with Shamet, like it did click, and this is kind of what I wanted to get into next, like just what lineups and groupings we're most excited about, and watching it was, what was it, 4 minutes against the Wolves, 5 minutes against the Wolves we got of Deuce, Shamet, Mikal, OG, Cat. I know a lot of people had this reaction. I'm not the first, but I was just saying, like, yes, like light bulb on moment. This totally makes sense to me. Like, this is the way you, without, like, again, running a lot of sets explicitly for him, this is how you unlock Mikal Bridges, right? Like surround him with shooting, take Brunson off the floor, put the ball in his hands, and his ability, like in what was, I think you were getting at in like the magic of the starting lineup. And to your point on starting Deuce, this could have the same effect in the starting lineup. Like there was a play where like Mikal got Gobert on a switch and Mikal attacked Gobert and no one could help because they were just shooters at every other spot. And he got a layup, and Mikal's just ability to just throw like a little like improvisational randomness. I think that is also part of my issue with just relying on Jalen Brunson so much. Not that individually he isn't an extraordinarily creative player and like one of the most creative players like we've seen in the modern NBA, but as like, I guess, a creator for others, like it is like the offense is just fairly predictable when it's Jalen Brunson and 4 out around him. And I like, and that predictability works and is super effective. I like Mikal, like with the bench unit, injecting a little bit of randomness. I think Deuce McBride as someone who's just going to be like sprinting up the court and will like catch the ball on the fly and immediately fire a 3, a la what like Dante DiVincenzo brought last year. That injects a little bit of randomness. I think Cat in that group like gets a little frisky because they're playing a little bit more up tempo. And I'm trying to think of ways without Shamet, because I think he really bound that group together with his combination of shooting and like, not that he's a great defender by any means, but compared to someone like a Campaign or like a Tyler Kolek, he is a really good defender. And I've come out on like, I wouldn't mind seeing some of like, even though it's a smaller version of that, Cam, Deuce, Mikal, OG, Cat. I think as a bench lineup, they could survive that. You throw Brunson in there for Cam and you just get basically like the starting lineup, but with Precious at center in place of Cat. I think that's really interesting, where you just surround Brunson with as much defense as you possibly can with Deuce, Mikal, OG, Precious. I wouldn't mind seeing a version of that lineup with Kolek in place of Brunson. I know I'm throwing a lot out there, but basically I just feel like the strength of having Mikal and OG, and why it seems like every team in the league was willing to give up 4 first-round picks for those two guys, is that you can play these subpar defenders and just have like really, really solid two-way units. And I think there's almost more power and utility in that in the bench lineup, because you're taking advantage of the fact that those guys are great defenders and to separate degrees, OG a little bit, Mikal a lot, can also create their own offense. You put Cat in there, it just supercharges it. So just any combination of those 3 or Precious and those 2 wings plus Deuce, I think you could have some bench units that really give you some separation. And with how good the starting lineup's going to be, that's like when we talk about this team just being absolutely dominant in the regular season, like I think those are kind of the pathways. But were there any lineups in particular that caught your eye either in the preseason or just you'd want to get to as the season gets started?
You named a bunch of the really interesting ones that I'm excited to see. I think the one you didn't say, you can even put Hart. You know, you have Brunson on the bench, and you want one of your best lineups with Brunson on the bench. You just have Deuce with the starters basically, and you have Deuce, Hart, McCall, OG, and Precious instead of Towns even, but more obviously better Towns on the court with them. I mean, look, people are worried about Towns' rim protection. I actually think that was the thing he showed the most. That was his most promising aspect of his defense in the preseason. I'm worried about him in drop coverage. I thought, especially against Minnesota, that was rough. Anthony Edwards was just walking into threes. They all were. And I don't know if Tibbs wants Towns at the level. I hope he gets a little bit more aggressive there and changes it up there, because you put a lot of pressure on the point of attack defenders if you just have Cat dropping because you don't trust him to slide his feet with the ball handler. And all of a sudden, Hart, Deuce, OG, Bridges, they have to trail and they have to work their asses off to make sure that these guys aren't walking to pull up threes. That's part of the job. But I do think that it would be to the Knicks' benefit to, maybe mix up coverages a bit, bring it back to lineups. You mentioned Kolek and Payne. I can't believe I'm doing this. I never, 2 years ago, me wouldn't believe it. I think there's a pretty strong case for Cam Payne being in those lineups, and I think he's better on defense than people give him credit for. Of course,
he was locking up LaMelo Ball the other night.
I think this is totally intangible, not what High End Theory is about. He seems excited as hell to be in New York. I think he's going to be one of those annoying players other teams are going to hate. I think he's going to work his ass off in the 15 minutes per game he plays. I love Kolek, and we talked earlier about, reasons to start Deuce. I think you could play Payne and Kolek with a Hart Bridges combo on the wing, and that's your bench lineup. I think Kolek showed enough in the preseason. We've talked about it a bunch on Strickland. An older rookie like Kolek, I'm sure Prez would agree, our draft expert. An older rookie like Kolek, they have a higher correlation with guys who are ready to contribute positively from day one. Kolek was really good in college, but he's developed. He's probably closer to his peak right now than the average rookie, and he's shown nothing but good signs in the preseason. Having him next to Payne makes Payne more of an off-ball shooter, which you look at his shooting numbers across the board, 39% from three last year, 37%. Okay, he had a down year, 34%, 44%, 52%. Okay, he played 8 games that year, but this is a good shooter, 47% the year before. This is a good shooter. He doesn't need to be running the offense. He's not great at the rim, so you don't want to rely on him for rim pressure. Kolek running screen and roll with Payne off him, Bridges and OG on the wings, and Precious as your center. That's an amazing bench lineup. That's just a really good lineup. Replace Hart with OG. That's a really good bench lineup. Those are 4 bench guys and Bridges in that bench unit. So sorry, that was a little bit scrambled there. I forgot that I was hypothesizing Hart coming off the bench. But my point is that can be a viable bench unit. So that's something I would be excited to see. And I just want to clarify, because I'm always self-conscious that this comes off that I'm hating or underappreciating Josh Hart. I actually would argue that I am seeing something in him that other people aren't seeing. I value him as a Swiss Army knife, and I think that he's going to be closer to his best self when he's in these units, and his versatility is the thing that's most emphasized. So I think you put him in a lineup like that with the 2 guards, with Bridges, with Precious, we'd really see some of Hart's strengths come into play here. So that's something I'd be excited to see. And again, I think it gets the Knicks closer to the best version of themselves, at least in the short term.
I think it's a great point on Hart. I mean, we are fresh off a preseason where he literally did not score a point, and that was partially just his own apathy about the preseason after playing approximately 80 minutes a game in the playoffs, which is, what, Josh Hart, totally reasonable. You've earned it. And because I think one of the main counter arguments I heard, I know DJ over at Knicks Film School was making this, was is Deuce just underutilized if you use him in the starting lineup? And I would say, yeah, probably, but you are also kind of underutilizing Josh Hart in the starting lineup. And I think part of that is just a product of the group just needs time together, and it was thrown together in the preseason. And when not everyone knows their roles and when not everyone has the chemistry down, you just kind of default to all right, what is the easiest option that will get us, what is the quickest point A to B to getting a lot of buckets? And that's hey, why don't you let one of the top 8 players in the NBA and Jalen Brunson, one of the top 5 offensive players in the NBA and Jalen Brunson, just have the ball a whole lot. And I think some of that will get ironed out, but Deuce's spacing there is just sort of is a passive thing that he can do, where with Josh Hart, at least offensively, there's just kind of less like quote unquote passively he can do. Of course, he can be just a menace on the glass. He can be a connected passer. He can kickstart transition, but there's a little bit less passively he can do. Where actively, like we saw, like when you, and sometimes this is a weird thing for a player as aggressive as Josh Hart, to be the best version of himself, you kind of have to put him in a corner and say like, hey, it's just you. No one's coming to rescue you. Like I've referenced this sequence a bunch of times on the pod, but I'm going to keep going back to it because it just really sticks in my mind's eye. Last year against the Mavs, where like all the Knicks were down, and it reminded me of like a Western where like there was a shootout and like only 2 of the good guys are left. The bad guys, there's like 20 of them surrounding. And at a certain point, the good guys just pop out and say, you know what, let's just unload the clip. And that was Josh Hart, right? He started going back and forth with Luka Doncic, bombing threes, like by putting him at the bench unit, like that's versus just like the all of a sudden like Heedle's like level of star power, maybe not quite that much, but you get what I'm saying. Like level of starting lineup that the Knicks have now, like it puts Josh Hart in a corner and kind of like just forces the best out of him and says like, hey, you have to do everything. You have to initiate some offense. You have to attack aggressively off the dribble. You have to chuck open threes. And I think that could be beneficial to him, especially when, to your point, he's also going to get time with the starting lineup. I want to flip back to defense because I that was earlier in my rundown. I apologize. I'm disorganized today. I think it's a good point on Cat, where it's a little bit similar to some of the stuff with Julius that I've seen Benji Ritholtz highlight, where he had this whole inertia theory on Julius Randle, right? Where like, if he's not moving, it's like, it's really hard to get him moving. You almost have to make him move. I think it's kind of similar with Cat, and it's less because of effort and focus for him, and more just like, I think because of his physical limitations. When he doesn't have a lot of momentum and when he's in drop, inherently in a back pedal, like you just see like a bad posture there relative to someone like Mitchell Robinson or Isaiah Hartenstein, who are on the balls of their feet, right? Have those super strong cores and are alert and are springy, like Precious Achiuwa too, and are ready to like pop to the basketball and poke it away. Like Cat, for like all the ways that he's an athletic marvel, that's just not it, right? Like he's like a heavier, thicker built guy. Like he's just not the fleetest of foot. And by like pushing him up, like that was Dane Moore made this point. I think it was on Knicks Film School. Like that was the best he ever played in Minnesota, right? 2 years ago when he was at center, and they were saying like, hey, like we were going to play ultra aggressive. No one else in the NBA does this. We're just going to trap the ball. I think there's a mix there. And I think Cat actually impressed me with like his ability to like stick with guards when he had to, like block the crap out of his old teammate. And I think it's with Josh Minot on the Timberwolves. But I think anything you can do to make Cat more of an active and like initiating defender versus a passive defender is good for the team. There are times in like situations he's just going to have to be in drop, and I'm curious how he handles that. But I just think you got to take advantage of the fact that you have 2 guys, and maybe 3 if Hart does start, in Hart, McHale, and OG, who are just brilliant as sort of like backline cleanup guys. And maybe in McHale's case, it's more theoretical because he hasn't been asked to do that a lot. But I think if you've Cat up top and you get beat, you have maybe the single best guy in the NBA that's not a center, in OG Anunoby rotating over to help. Like it'll work sometimes, and when it doesn't, like you have good safety valves. So I think that's kind of the best argument for using Cat at the level, at least like a little bit more than you are, and not exclusively having him.
All right, guys, we'll be back with Geoff in just a sec to continue talking through the Knicks defense and the power of OG Anunoby, how he can enable Cat to be more aggressive and it actually pay off for the New York Knicks. But first, I want to tell you about our new friends over at Hims. Guys, ever feel like you need a little boost in the bedroom? I'll tell you what, I had no issues after Jalen Brunson's 60-point game or after Dante DiVincenzo's game winner against the Philadelphia 76ers, but sometimes you're not going to have that external boost. It's time to stop worrying about your performance and get Hims so you can feel confident knowing you can get hard and stay hard whenever you're in the mood. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. All you have to do is answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option and prescribe your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. So start your free trial online today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. Hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compound products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions required, an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Prices varies based on price and subscription plans. I also want to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200. I got to emphasize this. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So I've been rolling on the NFL odds. I told you a little bit about those earlier. I'm going to take you through the NBA now. Opening night, the Minnesota Timberwolves are only 2-point favorites over the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are fine this year. They might come out. They might play a good game. I think that is a little bit of big market bias. Minnesota, clearly the better team. I know they're still going to be working out the kinks, incorporating Julius into the starting lineup. I don't care. I like Minnesota in that game. Go ahead, make some money. Again, that is just $5 down for $200 in bonus bets when you place your first bet, only on FanDuel.com.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. That was perfect. That was I feel like the guy in old school. That was wonderful. I think what we just keep dancing around is the importance of OG Anunoby. He's so vital to this team. And I want to, I don't think I can add to what you just said. I think you nailed it. I want to highlight something you said before about active versus passive, because I think people listening, that was just so on point. And when you think about a guy like Josh Hart, and you think he is like the poster child of how this stuff matters, because you see him scrambling for loose balls. You see him pushing the pace. You see him, occasionally taking to the basket and being this great rim runner. These account for such a small percentile of the overall possessions. Passive impact is so important. And these are the things that Gavin was just talking about on defense too. You may not see it. You may not see OG at the point of attack, but when he's there hovering at the free safety, there's 100 possessions of that he's always there. And these little micro levels of impact, they add up over the totality of a game, of a month, of a season. These things are really important. And it's why things like passive spacing are so underrated, especially by people who, aren't as into analytics and just watch with their eyes. It is human nature to watch what is happening with the ball. That is what everyone's doing. Unless you're watching the game, you're doing film study. When you're watching the game, you're watching the ball. So you're missing how important player A spacing in the corner versus player B spacing in the corner and what that does for an offense over 100 possessions. You're missing that. And defensively, to Gavin's point, when Cat's at the level instead of in drop, you're missing how valuable it is to have OG Anunoby on the wing ready if Cat gets beat, as opposed to RJ Barrett on the wing. That's something the mind's eye will never, ever see unless you're looking for it. So I just thought it was such a good point. I wanted to reemphasize it. This is just such a beautiful game. I could talk about it forever. And that was a great point by you.
Oh, well, I really appreciate it, Geoff. It means a lot. How about we finish up with this? Because we've kind of successfully hit on everything I wanted to talk about in a very circuitous way. And we've hit a little bit on this, but I wanted to finish on rookie watch, because obviously that Hornets game was about the rookies, right? That was the story of the game. Tyler Kolek, I'm with everything you said earlier. I'm just incredibly impressed by how advanced he is. I think if you might somehow, even with OG McHale, find a way to only be an average defense if you did this, or even a below average defense. But if you just plug Tyler Kolek into Jalen Brunson's role, essentially right now, not shooting as much, but that amount of minutes, that amount of time on the basketball, I think he'd be top 5 in the NBA in assists right now. And I don't think that's like a crazy out there prediction. I just think it's what would happen. I think he's that good, that advanced, of not just a passer, but a manipulator, and just like understanding like time and space and pace. He's just so advanced. But these guys are going to have to play a role now in a way they weren't going to have to before the Dante Julius trade. They weren't going to necessarily have to as much before Shamet got hurt. But in some form or fashion, I think these rookies are going to be important. And I'm curious, like if you want to run through all 4 of them, if you want to just run through like 1 or 2 that stand out to you. And I know you already mentioned Kolek on the bench unit. So if you want to just briefly touch on that, like what role do you see those guys having? And like, how feasible do you think it is that they can take on like even some of these minutes? Because I don't think, like, if let's just say Landry Shamet's out for 6 weeks and the Knicks say like, hey, we really like him. We love the shooting that he brings. We like how smart he is defensively. We're just going to bite the bullet and try to survive those 6 weeks and not replace him with someone who we think will not be able to play for us in the playoffs, where Shamet will be able to play for us in the playoffs. Like, you're asking maybe like, you only have to get 10 minutes, I think, from any one of these guys. Is it Kolek? argument for someone like Pacome playing a little bit? Like what do you make of it just based on what we saw this preseason, based on what we saw this summer league?
It's Kolek. It's got to be Kolek. I think he would be ready if they knew Shamet was only out 6 weeks. I think Kolek can step in and they'd be fine. I think Kolek and Deuce, which would be the problem of a bench backcourt, would be fine. Kolek, to your point, I love the word you use, manipulator. Even in confined spaces, I think he could create, good league average offense, even if they do go Precious and Sims in the front court in this bench unit. I think that you could run the offense through him in a way that would alleviate the burden on Mikal Bridges with the bench unit, and it would let Deuce play his prime role as an off-ball shooter. I think he's the answer. As far as Dadiet goes, I want to say I don't think he's ready to play NBA minutes. I think he showed such promising flashes. My favorite sequence in that last game was a play where Kolek found him above the break, and he beat they played Charlotte last game. Yeah. He beat Brandon Miller on a closeout. Brandon Miller, excuse me if I'm not allowed to curse. He beat Brandon Miller on a closeout, and he kicked it back out to Kolek. Kolek was open, and he passed on the three, something he has to work at. He's a good shooter, but I don't know how willing he is to be a high volume shooter. Kolek passed on the three. I swear, 99 out of 100 rookies just stand there. They're like, I did my job. I'm in the paint. Kolek, it's on you. Dadiet has the wherewithal to relocate to the corner when the play breaks down. Kolek penetrates. Dadiet is in the corner. Of course, Kolek finds him because he's an elite passer. And that's 3 points that I don't think you get if, it's most other rookies who don't have the wherewithal to relocate to the corner. I think he's shown incredible flashes on the wing. I think he's got the body. I think he's going to be a good shooter. I just don't think. I think Tibbs would lose his mind, to be honest. Yeah. I think I don't want to see Tibbs have a heart attack on the sideline. Yeah. I think you go with the safer player for now, and I totally understand why they would do that. But I think when you consider all the factors around the Dadiet pick, the money that was the reason they took him, right? Like they wanted to give a rookie less money, and they picked the right one. I think there are guys. I think they're going to regret not taking Dunn out of Virginia. They're going to say that was a guy we could have had. Maybe we wish we looked into, but aside from Dunn, I do think that Dadiet, they're going to be happy that they took him. Honestly, Huck Porty, if you had to play a rookie off the bench, I think you make an argument for Huck Porty over Dadiet right now, just because his job is simpler as a rim running center. Mm-hmm. I think they're pretty similar in pretty similar spots in terms of how NBA ready they are. But I think Huck Porty's job is just a lot easier in Tibbs' scheme on both ends of the court. So if I had to play one, I would play him. I don't mean this in a condescending or negative way. I don't have thoughts on McCullers. So I will happily cede those to you if you think there's a legit chance he can get in the rotation.
Yeah, I think it's hard because unless I put out a call to action on Twitter, I'm going to check right now. I don't think here's what we got from Daniel Wexler. Shout out to Daniel Wexler responding to my comment of his. I was going to say, I don't think we've gotten any update on Kevin McCullough Jr. Apparently there's a vague report that he wasn't, quote, close to returning when camp opened. So who knows? Maybe he's out the whole year. Maybe he's out half the year. But just in terms of profile, like someone who played 4, maybe even 5 years at one of the best schools in the country, profiled as like an absolutely elite defender, turned into like a quality shooter by the end. Like just in terms of what the Knicks need, like if you just could throw someone out there who could be scrappy, could shoot the basketball, has experience as a primary scorer, so maybe could give you like a little bit off the bounce. Like to me, like even though he's the only one of the 4 we haven't seen, he is like the best template of what the Knicks actually need at that spot. I think with Kolek, like it's what we've talked about the whole show, but like you're almost pushed to a point where you have to start Deuce. And if Tibbs doesn't do that, you have to like get weird with your minutes, like pulling Bridges here, pulling Hart here, or like at least for the first 6 weeks of the season, like being like, hey guys, guess what? You're playing 38 minutes a game again. Congratulations, which is not the end of the world, but with the talent the Knicks have, not necessarily ideal. I'm with you on Pacome, ultimately. Like I think he is really, really advanced. I think he needs year to build his body up, year to get ready for NBA physicality. I think what looks great against the Hornets might not look great against the Celtics. I also am worried we're reading a little too much into the jumper when he really struggled shooting the ball in Summer League. Though I will say I am not a shot doctor. It looked just beautiful in that Hornets game. And I almost struggle to see how that guy can't shoot the basketball. And I'm almost surprised he didn't shoot better than 75% at the line. I think it was in Europe last year, because he looks like someone who's like an 85% at the line kind of guy. So very optimistic about his future. I keep meaning to mention Dunn. He would be the plug and play guy now that he's magically developed from someone who has never shot the basketball before to apparently like a really good 3-point shooter in the NBA. But they'll figure it out. I think if McCullough's somehow healthy, he could be the answer. If not, I'm increasingly, we have to hear the report on Shamet. If it's like 4 months, obviously that changes the equation. If he needs surgery, that changes the equation. If he avoids surgery, like I'm coming around the idea like, hey, keep him. You're probably not going to find anything better. Seems like a good fit, and you can figure things out. Geoff, thank you so much for coming on, buddy. This was a blast. We haven't gotten to talk yet, but lived up to all my expectations. I'm a big fan of the hot hand theory. Can you tell everyone where they can find it?
Yeah, we're Hot Hand Theory everywhere. XJ and I laugh at least once a day that it was available on all socials, but it's everywhere. We're YouTube is we have a weekly podcast. It's basically just, what you heard from me today. We do film and we mix it with analytics, and we basically just cover the NBA from our own kind of unique, we hope unique perspective, and we really enjoy it. We have a ton of fun over there. We're building pretty fast. So if you're looking for more NBA content, we hope you come and join us. I
was going to say, beyond you and XJ just being brilliant and a lot of fun together, it's a great name, and I'm shocked that it was available. But good on you guys. That is a great name for a basketball podcast. Thank you. Yeah, it was shocking. Like when we, not to stretch this out, but when we came up with it, XJ was actually just like, yeah, that's a good name, but no chance it's available. Yeah. And then he, like 5 minutes later, was like, whoa. He's like, and then we kind of took off from there. So yeah, we're really proud of it. Only a year old, and we had, small expectations in terms of growth, and we've just completely blown that out of the water. So I don't think anyone listening, if you liked what you heard today, will regret coming to, if you want to hear more takes about the Knicks, or just, get more access, the wrong word, get more coverage of the league. I don't think you'll regret coming to join us. All right, guys, Hot Hand Theory, anywhere podcasts are found. Locked On Knicks, anywhere podcasts are found. We'll talk to you soon on both.